Hey guys, it's Dakota Sage. Welcome to my channel. Before I even get into Sunrise on the Reaping, I have to talk about this because I feel stupid as hell. A couple months ago, I made a video talking about how when they inevitably remake The Hunger Games, I should play Katniss Everdeen. And it never occurs to me that my name is Dakota Sage. That's a color, and granted, it's my middle name. I don't have two first names, and I don't know any songs with the name Dakota in it, but literally, this is like a birthday keepsake I had when I was little. There, it's right there. That's not, I didn't make that name up. That is my actual birth certificate name, and I'm out here like, oh, I should play Katniss Everdeen because I run really fast. Anyway. But the first thing that I want to talk about in the actual book is that I really enjoyed the nod to Appalachian culture and more how it survived through into District 12. I'm from PA, so I actually relate to some of this stuff. It is a little different where I live, but in particular, my mother always makes ham and bean soup. Not for funerals, but I have eaten it quite a few times. In fact, she actually usually makes it right after Easter because we eat a ham and then she takes the bone and like the ham that's kind of stuck to the bone and uses that as the basis for the soup. Also, chow chow. I thought chow chow was Pennsylvania Dutch because it's something my grandmother always made, but apparently it's all throughout the Appalachians and even into Canada, which news to me. I don't know if other places eat chow chow the same way, but where I come from, it's vegetables pickled with sugar and spices. In the Pennsylvania Dutch culture, we eat a lot of stuff that's vinegar and sugar. If you guys are like haters of sweet pickles, not me, girl. I could eat that shit up. But you see a lot of pickled stuff all throughout the Appalachians because a lot of really poor people had to pickle their stuff to make it last through the winter. But Appalachian culture has always been seen as very strange, even to like us, and I live right next to the Appalachians. Like people where I live used to call central Pennsylvania Pennsyltucky. Baby, it's the pot calling the fucking kettle black. We're all eating cream chip beef on toast and none of us can talk right. You know how many times I've been at school and been made fun of for saying things like water or orange or crick? But like I said earlier, people that live in the Appalachians tended to be very poor. People didn't want to work in the mines because it sucked. So oftentimes these jobs were left to the immigrants. And then when the coal mining business dried up in favor of electricity, a lot of them were left very, very poor. If you ever go to Knoebels, which is an amusement park in central PA, it is in the heart of coal mining country, and they actually have an entire museum and a ride about the coal mines. It sounds kind of stupid and it is a little campy, but it actually gives you a real insight to what working in these mines are like. I'm totally yapping before I even get to the book, but I have one more thing. I promise this is the last one. When these immigrants moved to the Appalachian Mountains, they were overwhelmingly Northerners, of course. So in 1860, when Virginia wanted to secede from the Union to become the Confederacy, the part of Virginia that was in the Appalachian Mountains was like, we do not want to do that because we don't agree with slavery. So the people that lived in the Appalachians actually just straight up broke off from Virginia and became West Virginia and stayed in the Union. I just thought that that was neat to include because the people that lived in the Appalachians have always been incredibly scrappy, and I really like that Suzanne Collins bases District 12 there because that spirit lives on in Katniss and the other characters. But now to the actual book. The first thing I really noticed is how Haymitch is so much more of a reliable narrator than Katniss. Haymitch is like, oh, these are my best friends, Blair and Burdock, and Burdock's in Everdeen, and he's cousins with Lenore Dove, and Lenore Dove's my girlfriend, and I love her. And Katniss is like, imagine I aren't really friends because no one likes me, even though we sit together at lunch every single day, and I specifically bring her strawberries because I know that she likes them. Poor Katniss, you know, the self-loathing is actually so sad. Like, when she gets reaped, and she's like, oh, people are only giving me the, like, respect sign because they love Prim. Girl, it's you! I also really liked how Lenore Dove was very outwardly covey. I thought that probably after the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the covey would have kind of went into hiding, but in this book we see that that is absolutely not true. These people have been here and they're going to continue to be here regardless of what the Capitol wants. Just like everybody else, the Reaping had me shook. It was so sweet when Lenore Dove and Haymitch keep looking back at each other every time someone's name is called, and then I forget who was, I don't remember the guy that got shot, who was called last, and they're like, oh my gosh, you know, it's not us. And then it ends up being them anyway. And then when Lenore Dove comes to the platform to see Haymitch off because she doesn't want her reaction to be shown on camera, and Haymitch is literally like beating against the glass, which is just like how Katniss did at the end of the Hunger Games when they took Peeta away into surgery, and also like she did when they were attacking Cinna before she went into the arena in Catching Fire. And I really like Maisley Donner because when we first meet her on the train, it's very obvious that her entire life she's just wanted to be her own person, and her only chance to do that is when she's literally going to her death. Despite Maisley being very stuck up, her biggest thing is that she hates being trapped in this role that she feels like she's being forced to play, just like how Katniss felt in the Hunger Games. And even though she knows that Lenore Dove does not like her, she never tells anybody about her rebellion because she knows that they're on the same side. Also, the girl gives no fucks. She knows she's going to die. She straight up smacks the fuck out of Drusilla. Drusilla, I think. I keep wanting to call her Drusilla because I think that's one of the ugly stepsisters in Cinderella. But Drusilla starts to literally beat Maisley with a riding crop after this, and she keeps telling her, oh no, I hope you win, because you have no idea what's in store for you after. So Drusilla most likely knew that these tributes were them being forced into things like prostitution or having their families killed, and she wanted Maisley to suffer. This was definitely not a well-kept secret between the people that are working in the games. In the Hunger Games book, Katniss, I think, is looking at Glimmer, and she's talking about like, oh, every year there's at least a couple people whose whole angle is that they're sexy. Why would they want to come across as sexy to the audience? Because the audience is more likely to give them money and give them sponsorships because they want to sleep with them. And you can only sleep with a tribute that wins. Or when Haymitch is talking about how he literally met Luella on the day that she was born because her father held her up to the window and showed all the neighborhood kids. It really just shows that District 12 is so much more of a tight-knit community than Katniss leads us to believe, which makes it so much worse when they have to send kids into the Hunger Games. And then when Luella dies, he's actually grateful that she didn't die in the arena because he knows that that death would have been so much worse. And then meeting Wyrus and Mags as the District 12 mentors, and literally as soon as Mags sees Haymitch, she goes to give him a hug and ask him if he's okay, and naturally, the poor boy burst into tears. And as we all know, in Catching Fire, the allies that Katniss first wants are Mags, Wyrus, and Beetee. But also, in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Tigress tells Snow that if she was a tribute, she would just want to know that somebody still cared about her. And that is exactly what Mags does. Just this little bit of kindness, and even though it's brief, there is a moment of security, and that leads Haymitch to breaking down. And then we have Snow absolutely crashing out about Haymitch and Lenore Dove, and Haymitch is literally sitting there with pretty much no clue as to what's going on. Haymitch thinks that Snow has had cameras in the districts this entire time. I would disagree. I think that he put cameras in after realizing that the Covey are still around. At the end of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Snow says that Lucy Gray and her Mockingjays can never hurt him again, and he is realizing in real time that that is not true. But when Snow brings out Lulu and tells Haymitch that it's his birthday present, he says, I hope you treat it the way that it deserves. Now, he probably thought that Haymitch would just kill Lulu, or at the very least, isolate her because her entire existence is unnatural. But Haymitch and the other tributes know that despite capital interference, Lulu is still a person, and she still deserves to be treated like a person. And they never saw her as a mutt or a tool of the capital, unlike how Peeta saw himself in Mockingjay. And Snow replaced her because her death outside the games makes the Capitol look incompetent, just like they did at the beginning of the 10th Hunger Games. Literally, the whole plotline with Ampert is just so terribly sad, and I want to point out that in Catching Fire, when Katniss is talking about how her and Peeta are going to have to get married and probably eventually have children, she says that the children of victors tended to be reaped, and she says that she thinks it's because it makes good TV, but in reality, a large part of that is probably to punish these victors. Snow believes himself to be the only true victor. The actual winners of the Hunger Games mean nothing to him. Then we have the phone call with Lenore Dove, and Haymitch's initial reaction to realizing that she's on the other line is just heartbreaking. And then she tells Haymitch that she's actually been arrested, but I think an important thing about this is that they're probably gonna, in the movies, make it so like she was starting this angry crowd, but in truth, that angry crowd was already there. She just got up on stage and riled them up more. Because this revolution did not start and end with these Mockingjays like Snow believes, it starts with the people in the district. The Mockingjays are just the ones echoing this stuff and getting it out there. And then we have Maisley again, who is viewed as very materialistic for her love of jewelry, but in reality it's actually her art form, and she uses this to help the other tributes honor their districts. And then we have the bad stylist. I don't remember what his name was, so Effie Trinket shows up to save the day. And Effie's sister is talking about how she was like this model student and she was president of all these clubs, and this is very important because it means that Effie Trinket could have worked with any district she wanted, but she actively chose District 12 out of both respect and probably because she wanted to keep an eye on Haymitch. And even though Effie buys into the propaganda of the Capitol and she thinks that the Hunger Games is an important thing, she still values the people in the districts, even the backwoods laughingstock that is District 12. And then during the interviews, Haymitch takes the angle of being a lovable rascal, not unlike how Snow did when he was introducing Lucy Gray. They're both breaking the rules, but when Snow does it, it's very boyish and charming, and when Haymitch does it, it's rebellion. Then we get to the bloodbath, and Wyatt Callow, who calculated the chances of every single person in there winning, sacrifices himself for Lulu, who he knows doesn't have a chance. And he is more than likely the person that told her to go find Haymitch. And Haymitch is literally in the arena becoming friends with rabbits because they remind him of Lenore Dove. And he thinks about Lenore Dove pretty much all the time. He even sings her songs to the other tributes. And then when Lulu does find him and eventually dies, he carries her under a willow, just like the song Deep in the Meadow, where it talks about willow trees are places of safety. And then we have Ampert literally getting eaten alive by mutts, which is probably the most terrible death that we see in the Hunger Games. He could have walked into the bloodbath and allowed himself to be slaughtered. He would have been dead in seconds. But instead, he's so committed to trying to take down the Capitol that he's willing to be hurt in this way, and he's literally only 12 years old. Obviously, Beetee, of course, does have a big influence over these actions, but also in the book, it talks about how Beetee's wife is pregnant, and then they are never mentioned in Catching Fire, which is, we know what happened to them. And then we have Maisley and Haymitch's friendship. They literally call each other brother and sister. And we also have Maisley insisting that they get silverware with their food because she says that if you let them treat us like animals, they will. And as we know in the Hunger Games, when Haymitch sends Katniss and Peeta food, he includes silverware, which Katniss thought was odd at the time, but now we know that Haymitch was directly doing this to help them seem more civilized, even when they're out there trying to survive in the wilderness. Sort of wilderness. When Maisley and Haymitch and the other two tributes meet the Capitol interns, Maisley kills them. Haymitch does not. Maisley is more like Gale, where she sees the Capitol and the districts as an us versus them, but Haymitch is more like Katniss, where he just sees these people as people that happen to be born in the Capitol. Like if Gale had volunteered for Peeta in the Hunger Games, both he and Katniss would have died because Gale hates the Capitol so much that he would have refused to play their game, whereas Peeta used their game to his advantage. And I also want to point out that in her rebellion, Lenore Dove was using orange spray paint. Guess whose favorite color is orange? But towards the end of the games, Haymitch finds one of his doves, and he sent a package of pudding and chocolate, most likely from Maisley's candy store owning family. And he shares this candy with Silka, the girl that is actively trying to kill them, because he understands who the real enemy is. Silka then full-on decapitates the other tribute, and she says oh, I have to go home, but even in the Hunger Games, that's pretty intense. They fight, Silka throws the axe over the edge, it rebounds and hits her, Haymitch wins. But despite this, he still tries to continue to blow up the arena, because he knows that being a victor means nothing, but him laying there as the explosion is raining down on him reminds me of how Katniss did the same thing at the end of Mockingjay. They both had been through so much suffering at this point that they just didn't care. Snow could have let Haymitch die, and I'm sure that was very tempting, but there would be no way to spin this death where the Capitol didn't look incompetent once again, because either they show the explosion and how it was orchestrated by Haymitch, or they talk about how they weren't able to medically save him in time. And then as part of the punishment, Haymitch has to constantly watch his little rabbits get eaten alive by snakes in some power move by Snow. And then later, Snow shows Haymitch a clip of Lucy Gray, and he's basically saying, "You don't know this girl? Nobody's gonna know your girl either." And if you watched the video where I predicted sunrise on the reaping, my predictions were almost more accurate than the part where I talked about things that we knew about Haymitch's games, because so much of it was cherry-picked to create a different narrative. The most heartbreaking part of this to me is not that they portrayed Haymitch as an asshole instead of a rascal, or even that they admitted Lulu's death, but that they made it seem like Haymitch abandoned Maisley, when in reality, she just walked back to get the rest of their supplies. And as Haymitch is actively being crowned the victor, he can look into the audience and tell that Wirus and Mags were tortured, because Snow wants him to know that even though he won the games, he's never gonna win the game. And when Haymitch gets back to District 12 and realizes that his childhood home is on fire, he literally has to be held down by Burdock and Blair as he's yelling for his mother in the exact same way that Sejanus did. But the part where I actually had to put down the book and walk away for a minute was when Burdock was singing the Old There before, because I did not realize that it was a funeral song. I thought that Lucy Gray was singing this song in the arena to get back at the Capitol and say, you know what, I accept my death, and it doesn't matter how I die, I still had this great impact on the people around me. And while that is partially true, it's also partially true that she sings this song because there's no one else to do it for her, and she doesn't want to die without this tradition. But what made me cry more was thinking about how at the end of Mockingjay, when Prim dies, Katniss is so distraught that she's literally not speaking, but she's singing. Guess what song she was probably singing at that time? And the fact that Haymitch was probably listening to her sing this song. Then of course we have how Snow actually gave Haymitch the opportunity to save Lenore Dove, but he missed it. Unlike how Katniss caught Peeta before he could eat the Nightlock. Then we have Haymitch literally wandering the mountainside in the woods, calling out to Lenore Dove, similar to Lucy Gray in the Ballad of Lucy Gray. And Burdock shows Haymitch where she's buried to give him that closure. And she happens to be buried next to a grave marker for Lucy Gray. Now, whether Lucy Gray is actually in that grave or it's just a memorial, it's not really specified. But more so than all of that, in the epilogue, when Haymitch is talking about how they succeeded in preventing another sunrise on the reaping day, he still just wants to die. He is completely satisfied with the fact that his liver is going to give out, because all he's wanted to do for these past 25 years is rejoin the people that he loved. It was a very good book, but it really is majorly depressing, and honestly, it made me feel like I was kind of personally stupid for distracting myself with things that don't necessarily matter as much as other things happening. And growing up with the internet and social media, there's kind of two people that have come from that. There's the people that ignore everything going on in the real world in favor of the internet, and they're obsessed with consumerism and vanity and gossip. And then there's the other side where people are so swept up in all the terrible things going on in the world that they can't enjoy their real life. It's like one side is distracted by anything and the other side is hyper aware of everything. And while you definitely don't want to be part of the first group, being part of the second group isn't good for you either, because you're actively hurting yourself. Social media, clickbait article titles, and the 24-hour news cycle has led Gen Z to be constantly bombarded by bad news their entire lives, and it's leading them to be disproportionately depressed compared to other generations. It's good to be informed, but also the world is so much bigger than the things that we're seeing on our phones, and you will learn so much more about it if you actually go into it. This book is outright telling us that we need to enjoy things. We need to read. We need to listen to music. We need to make art. We need to foster human connection that is tangible, not just followers on a screen. And by doing that, we will see ourselves as more human, and we will see other people as more human. And the more you interact with these things, the better your critical thinking is going to be, and the easier it's going to be for you to spot when a narrative is being pushed. So I have some examples, and they're not really political examples because Like I said, we're already surrounded by that. So I'm going to talk about how it kind of influences us on things that aren't necessarily as important. My first example of this is Netflix's Drive to Survive. If you've been on my channel, you know I love Formula One, and Netflix promotes this show as a documentary, and it is definitely not. It's a reality TV show. Like, one of the plot lines in the last season was about one of the drivers, George Russell, who apparently people were saying wasn't good enough to drive for Mercedes, and then it was this whole like big deal that he won a race, but the problem was he had won a race prior to that, and that specific race they were talking about, he actually got disqualified because his car was too light. But none of that fit into the narrative, so it was changed. They had been taking pieces from some races and then putting them into other ones for years, but in this season specifically, because they were trying to push this whole Lando Norris versus Max Verstappen thing, they had a clip of Max Verstappen being like upset that Lando Norris won his first race, and the clip was from a different race. Also, he really didn't look very upset. And Lando Norris gets very tan, but you can watch some of these interviews with him where he is actively changing colors mid-interview. You have to watch the show with knowledge about the actual races and also understanding that they are going to change things to make it seem more interesting. A sort of similar example is the TV show Dance Moms. Now, there's a lot of times where Dance Moms was faked, but in particular, there was an interview with Nia where she says that she was nervous about her front aerial, and then later when she's doing the dance, she messes up her front aerial. But if you listen to her talking, it's very obvious that this was clipped together. That doesn't really change what happened, but they did want to use foreshadowing, so they just created foreshadowing. But away from reality TV, because I think we all know at this point that reality TV is very doctored, my next example is Hershey's chocolate. A couple years ago, Hershey came out with this campaign for like International Women's Day where it was like Hershey's, and everybody was like, oh, this company is so feminist and they're supportive of gender and all these things. And then the conservatives were like, oh yeah, I'm not eating liberal chocolate or whatever. But nobody was like, oh, I'm not eating Hershey's because they're using slave labor on the Ivory Coast. My final example, and as Hunger Games fans, I think this one is a little closer to our heart, is Rachel Zegler. Now, I'm sure there were plenty of people that didn't want to watch the movie specifically because of Rachel Zegler, but there's even more people that don't want to watch the movie because the movie looks like shit. So Ben Platt bitching on social media about how his dad had to go talk to Rachel Zegler about her social media post when his dad could have just made a good movie to begin with. It's kind of ridiculous. And I said back in January of last year that Disney was going to let this girl take the fall for this shit movie, and look what's happening. I didn't like how Rachel talked about the original Snow White, but she's also just repeating the things that she's been fed as an actress. And the only thing she ever said that really pissed me off was when she told people that don't agree with her politically to not watch any of the stuff that she's in. And this pissed me off because when you're making political art, the people that you want to watch this art the most are the people that disagree with you on the off chance that it might get them to change their mind. So in her turning away this entire audience is just completely out of touch and further pushing this us versus them mentality. But I think the thing that people are not realizing is that regardless of anything that she said that was taken negatively, there's a lot of people that aren't on the internet at all, and they might have kids or grandkids that they would entertain taking to this movie. And Disney refuses to acknowledge that the CGI monstrosities and bad plot is what's making people not want to go to the movie, not Rachel Zegler. It's just frustrating, and I created a whole video talking about the Snow White movie and why it was gonna fail, and at the end I was like, don't let Rachel Zegler take the fall for this. And I actually had people in the comments being like, no, it's her fault. She did not write the movie! And you don't have to like her, but it's crazy to me that people are cocksucking this billion-dollar conglomerate that is Disney instead of being like, hey, this person that I really don't like probably isn't the reason why the movie failed. And honestly, the movie was so bad that a lot of people are actually kind of waking up to this, especially because people are like, literally the only good thing about the movie was Rachel Zegler's singing, but the damage is already done. And she was just cast on the West End, like her stage career is gonna be fine, but her career in movies, honestly might be completely over. Also, Disney literally put a rabbit on the red carpet to Snow White, and they didn't put any actual animals in the movie. How does that work? Long story short, don't just blindly accept the things that other people are telling you, actually form your own opinion on it. But that's it for today, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and have a great rest of your day. Also, drink lots of water because we're probably all pretty dehydrated after reading Sunrise on the Reaping.